In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you something that was deliberately removed from Christian practice in the 4th century. Not lost. Removed. There were 2 specific prayers, 2 exact spoken structures that Jesus gave to his closest disciples, not to the crowds, to the inner circle, and the church killed both of them. Here's what you need to understand from the start. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD was not a theological conference. It was an intelligence operation. The men who gathered under Constantine's authority weren't debating scripture because they loved God. They were deciding which version of Jesus would be most useful for controlling a population. A Jesus who handed you weapons of spiritual sovereignty was a problem. A Jesus who told you to wait, to be patient, to submit to earthly authority, that was an asset. The 2 prayers I'm going to walk you through today were not poetic requests. They weren't asking anything from anyone. They were commands, frequency commands spoken in a specific sequence that disrupt the surveillance architecture the Archons have built inside your field. When you understand what these prayers actually do at the bioelectric level, you'll understand immediately why they had to go. Stay with me. Because what I'm about to show you has nothing to do with theology. Before the church was the church, there was a network. Small communities scattered across the eastern Mediterranean, from Alexandria to Damascus to the hills outside Jerusalem. These weren't congregations in the modern sense. They operated with layers of teaching, surface material for new arrivals, and something considerably deeper for those who had been vetted, those who had demonstrated they could hold it. The Nag Hammadi manuscripts discovered in 1945 in an Egyptian desert give us a direct window into what was circulating in those inner circles. These were not heretical fringe texts. Many predate or parallel the canonical Gospels, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas, the Apocryphon of John. These documents describe a picture of Jesus' actual teaching that looks almost nothing like what ended up in church on Sunday morning. The emphasis was not faith, not waiting, technique. The Apocryphon of John is particularly specific. It describes the Archons, entities operating through the architecture of the material world, and it outlines practices for disrupting their access to human consciousness. The language used maps closely onto what modern bioelectric research now describes independently: interference patterns, field disruption, resonant charge. When Constantine moved to consolidate power through a unified Christian doctrine, he needed one Jesus. Not the one from the Gnostic cells who handed people tools for personal spiritual sovereignty. He needed the Jesus who said, "Render unto Caesar." The Council of Nicaea became the mechanism for that removal. The bishops who gathered had access to hundreds of texts that never made it into the Bible, you know. Some were destroyed outright, others vanished. A few ended up buried in ceramic jars in the Egyptian sand where they sat for 16 centuries until a farmer broke one open by accident. The 2 prayers that were cut weren't long rituals. That's actually why they were dangerous. They were short, precise, repeatable. The kind of practice a person could do alone, silently, anywhere, without a priest, without a building, without institutional permission. You cannot manage a population that holds that kind of capability, so you remove it, and you replace it with something that requires you. Now, before we get to the prayers themselves, I need to make sure you actually understand what prayer is, not the version you were handed, what it is. Your vocal apparatus, the larynx, the resonating chambers of your skull, the coordination of breath and tongue is a precision instrument. When you produce sound, you are not simply moving air. You're generating coherent pressure waves that propagate outward through every medium they contact, including your own tissue. Your bones vibrate, your cerebrospinal fluid moves. The electrical activity in your brain shifts measurably within seconds of sustained tonal production. This is documented. This is not metaphysics. The HeartMath Institute has spent decades measuring the electromagnetic field the heart generates, which extends 3 to 4 feet beyond the physical body. That field is not static. It changes with breath pattern, with emotional state, and with sound. Specific tonal combinations produce measurable coherence spikes in the cardiac field. Others produce the opposite, what the research calls incoherence, a fragmented, scattered field. This is where the Archons come in. The Gnostic tradition understood them not as demons in the Hollywood sense. They are what the texts call administrators of the lower aeons, entities that operate in the dimensional layer that interpenetrates the physical world. Their mechanism of influence is not dramatic possession, it's subtler. They work by amplifying the incoherence that a chronically stressed nervous system already produces. They don't create the fear, they tune into it. They sustain themselves on a specific type of human energetic output, what later traditions called louche, the emotional energy generated by confusion, anxiety, and helplessness. What happens then when a human being produces coherent vocal frequency combined with specific breath coordination in a state of concentrated and calm intentionality? The cardiac field reorganizes. The scattered noise that Archon surveillance is calibrated to detect disappears. From the perspective of a fourth-dimensional monitoring system, the person effectively goes silent. The first prayer does exactly this. It doesn't ask anything. It creates a condition. The second prayer does something different. It doesn't just silence the signal, it transmits one. A command structure that, according to the Apocryphon of John, forces any Archon presence that has already embedded itself in your field to identify itself and then withdraw. Not because you're asking politely, because the frequency command triggers a response built into the architecture of reality itself. The Gnostic texts call this the rule of the monad, the operating principle that a human consciousness functioning at the frequency of their original divine spark cannot be held by a lower dimensional entity against its will. It's not a belief system, it's a rule of the system. Let me be specific about the mechanics. The first prayer runs approximately 7 breath cycles. The tonal structure moves from the base of the throat upward. You'll feel the resonance shift as you do it correctly, from chest vibration to a buzzing quality behind the bridge of the nose. That nasal resonance is the target. It corresponds to what the Essene tradition called the third gate, which maps anatomically onto the sphenoid sinus and its proximity to the pituitary gland. When that resonance activates, the pineal gland responds. The piezoelectric crystals present in pineal tissue generate a small electrical charge in response to pressure wave stimulation of surrounding structures. This has been documented by researchers at the University of Auckland and others in the early 2000s. The second prayer is shorter and structurally different. It's spoken at a flat, even pitch, deliberately monotone. The power in this one is not tonal, it's semantic. The specific structure of the question itself creates what the Gnostic tradition called a seal. Where the first prayer clears and reorganizes the field, the second one draws a boundary around it and issues a demand. Together, they create a window of sovereign energetic space that holds through the sleep cycle. There's something I want you to sit with for a moment. The concept of the Archons tends to get dismissed by people who encounter it for the first time, because the word sounds religious, and they've already decided their past religion. But the Gnostic tradition wasn't describing theology. It was describing an operational reality that the writers of those texts had apparently mapped in considerable detail. The Gospel of Philip says explicitly, paraphrasing from the Coptic, that the rulers of this world desire to deceive, because if they came out openly, the people would resist. The deception is the method, not force, not obvious control. The method is to make the architecture invisible so that no one thinks to push back against it. Modern psychology calls this invisible influence. Marketing calls it ambient persuasion. The Gnostics called it Archon surveillance. The label changes. The mechanism is the same. The moment they become visible to the person they're feeding from, the food source responds. Resistance starts. This is why the disclosure of these two prayers was classified as dangerous, because the prayers are accompanied by a framework that makes the invisible visible. I want you to stop and look honestly at the last 2 weeks of your life. How many mornings did you wake up already tired? Not physically, you had enough sleep, but thick, dense, in a way that didn't track with the night you'd had, like the day had already gone wrong before it started. How often do the same thoughts return? Not because you're choosing to revisit them, they circle back on their own. The same fear, the same unresolved resentment, the same scenario playing out for the 100th time. You didn't write this loop, but you're stuck in it. And the 3 a.m. window. If this is a pattern for you, and waking suddenly, completely, for no apparent reason, with a weight in your chest and a feeling that something in the room is wrong, that is not insomnia. That is not anxiety disorder. That is the footprint of something specific. The 3 a.m. hour appears in the Gnostic literature with unusual consistency. It corresponds to what the texts describe as the period of maximum permeability, when the electromagnetic field of the Earth reaches its daily minimum, and the dimensional boundary between the physical layer and the Archon operating layer thins to its lowest point. This is when access to the sleeping human field is easiest. This is the extraction window. Your body registers this even when your conscious mind dismisses it. That chest weight at 3 a.m. is your nervous system detecting an intrusion it was not designed to handle without tools. The thought loops during the day are not psychological. They are the residue of energy taken the night before. Your field is running a deficit and trying to restabilize, and the Archons have learned to exploit that restabilization process. There's a specific pattern I've heard from hundreds of people who've gone through this material. You are capable. You know you are capable because you can look back at earlier periods of your life and see evidence of it. There were times you were sharp, energized, creative, decisive. That person is not gone. But accessing that state has become progressively harder over time, and no external explanation has fully satisfied you. The sleep doesn't restore, the vacations don't reset, the therapy reaches a ceiling. What you're describing is a field running in chronic deficit, not because of what you ate or how you managed your time or whether you meditated enough, because something has been drawing from your field every night for years, and the cumulative drain has affected your baseline waking state. You are not broken, you are depleted. There's a significant difference, and the treatment is completely different. The hypostasis of the Archons, another Nag Hammadi text, describes the Archons' long-term strategy as dimming the light gradually, so the person never marks the moment when the darkness began. This is not dramatic extraction. It's a slow pull, consistent, low-level, invisible, the kind of thing that explains why a good day now looks like what a mediocre day looked like a decade ago. The chronic fatigue that doesn't respond to rest, the brain fog that has no medical explanation, the sense that you're fighting something you can't name. You are. And you've been doing it alone, without the two tools that were specifically designed for exactly this situation and specifically removed so you wouldn't have them. That removal was not an accident of history. It was a deliberate architectural decision made in 325 AD by men who understood precisely what they were taking away. Now I give it back. The first prayer comes from the Sethian tradition within Gnostic Christianity, one of the oldest preserved lineages, with direct textual roots in the Apocryphon of John. The Sethians understood the Archons not as monsters, but as what they literally were: administrators of a system, bureaucrats of a lower reality. Their power is real but bounded. They cannot maintain presence in the field of a human consciousness that has activated the monad, the original divine spark that pre-exists the material creation and cannot be touched by anything that came after it. The first prayer is a sealing. Do this before sleep. Sit upright, not lying down. Take 7 slow breaths, each exhale slightly longer than the one before. On the 7th exhale, begin speaking out loud. Not loudly, quietly, at conversational volume with no emotional inflection. Flat, calm, declarative. These are the words. I come from before this world. I carry the light that was before the Archons. No administrator of this system has claim on my field, my sleep, or my dreams. I seal this body. I seal this mind. I seal this night. Say it once. Sit in silence for 30 seconds, then sleep. The emotional flatness is not optional. Emotional intensity, even positive intensity, is part of what the Archons track and feed on. The calm, declarative tone is the correct frequency, because it does not produce the signal they're calibrated for. You are not performing devotion. You are stating a set of facts to whatever may be listening. The second prayer is for use at 3 a.m. or any moment during the night when you feel that presence, the weight, the wrongness, the sudden alertness that has no physical cause. Do not get up. Do not turn on a light. Do not speak out loud. In complete silence in your mind, direct these words inward, not outward, inward toward whatever is there. By what authority do you stand here? Name your source. That is the complete prayer. 7 words. This is the question the Apocryphon of John instructs the awakened soul to ask, because the rule of the monad compels any Archon presence to respond truthfully to a direct question of authority issued by a human operating from their divine origin. They cannot falsify the answer, and they cannot hold a field that has correctly identified them. The weight will lift. Your heart rate will return to baseline. Use the sealing prayer every night, not only when something feels wrong. Preventive application is substantially more effective than reactive. The Archons prefer to work before you notice them. The nightly seal removes the passive permission that the sleeping human field extends by default, the open door they've been using for a very long time. The 2 prayers don't restore everything overnight. I want to be honest with you about that. What they do is stop the ongoing loss. They close the extraction window. Once the nightly drain stops, the field begins to recover on its own, because your monad is self-regenerating. That is its fundamental nature. It doesn't need to be built up from outside. It needs the drain to stop. Tonight, you close it. I'll be direct with you about something. Most people who find this kind of information treat it as interesting. They save the video, they think about it for a few days, and then the weight comes back at 3 a.m. and they lie there and do nothing because the moment felt too small for the seriousness of what I described. Don't be that person. The prayers are simple. That's not a flaw. That's the point. The Archon surveillance architecture is sophisticated, but the countermeasure doesn't need to match it in complexity. It just needs to be applied. Tonight, the sealing prayer before you close your eyes, the disruption command if you wake in the window. What I've shown you today addresses the nighttime extraction, but there is a second layer of Archon access that runs through your waking hours, and it uses a completely different entry point. Not the sleep field, your language. The specific words and phrases you repeat to yourself throughout the day when you're frightened, when you're angry, when you're thinking about money or your body or your future are transmitting a frequency that functions as a standing invitation. The Archons didn't just remove 2 protective prayers, they left a replacement, a set of default language patterns that keep the channel open around the clock. In the next video, I'm going to show you 5 phrases the Gnostic tradition specifically identified as Archon frequency language. Sentence structures that, spoken internally or out loud, function as access permissions you grant without realizing it. And I'll show you the exact substitutions from the original teaching. That video is on screen right now. What you do with tonight is your decision, but you already know what you're going to do.